vibrancy that this church has. And I still remember your wonderful worship. And it's great when I came in to be able to see the young people. And it is a real joy. For those who are new and have not met me, I'm part of the CRC churches. And that's how I met your Pastor Yonki, and it's so kind enough to invite me back. I've been away in Thailand for the last 14 years and uprooted my family. I was one of the pastors in Wesley Mission over 9-10 years there, and then I had the calling where I've always had a calling to go on missions. And 2012, that's when I took the step of faith to actually leave Sydney and to go over to a rural area in Thailand, not the city of Thailand, but in the rural area of Thailand. So let me just give you a timeline in terms of what happened to me. So what I'm going to be doing today is sharing a bit of my journey, where I hope can encourage you, and at the same time, what I feel God is actually challenging all of us today. And we don't have a clicker, do we? Or you can just click for me. Just down to the time. I'll just click and you can go ahead. Just a PowerPoint. Next one. So this has been our roadmap, a journey we had over 14 years. And when I look back, it's easy for me to say 14 years. I mean, if I ask, Pastor Yonki within the church here in Hurstville, he can go back and draw the roadmap again, all the challenges he's had from the beginning of starting. And I'd love to hear the story all the way to where you presently are. 2012, when I arrived into Thailand, we first started up a foundation. We didn't start a church. We wanted to reach out where God had placed on my heart, where we reached out to orphans, neglected children, and abandoned elderlies. And we traveled, we found a place in northeastern Thailand, which is close to Laos. And that was an area where broken families were very common, where blended families, marriages of new families would actually leave their existing kids back in the village, which they don't want, because the new marriages will not want existing kids. It's too much of a burden. And they are left behind with the elderly to look after. And we established our presence over the years. And in 2015, about 3 years afterwards, we actually got staff on board that did far greater work than myself. God's been great, because in those years we had locals who believed in our vision, and they donated land to us. And this is something that, that blew my mind, because I never expected that. And I would just see God just doing wonderful things where land was donated. And in the same year, God challenged me to say, JT, you got to start a church. Now, I always believed when I went into a new community, I wanted to serve the community. I didn't want to go and take over or establish anything. And we always wanted to work with the local churches. But I'm not sure what it is like in Indonesia, but in Thailand, a lot of the churches are very territorial. It means, this is my land, this is my territory, you don't come and you don't try to take my people. So it's very territorial. And when we arrived, I made it known to all the pastors there. I said, I'm not here to take over the church. I'm not here to do anything. I'm just here to be able to serve God, share the gospel, feed the poor, and whoever we brought to Christ, I want to give you to disciple. Because I don't have the time to disciple. We want to get it handed over to the church to do that. Unfortunately, the church has never really wanted to work with the foundation. And that gave us a huge challenge, because every person we shared to that received Christ, we didn't know how we could pass him on to disciple. And that's when God challenged us. JT, start a church. And we started with just 5 people. All of them were the foundation kids. Because remember, the foundation was one where we wanted to reach out and give hope to children. And that was our main work. And we started just with a 5-6 handful of children. And the journey continued, where staff had changed, and eventually we built our church building. The project started in 2019, where we started a church building. And then I realized something, that JT, you're not going to be in Thailand for the rest of your life. I always knew that from the first day I stepped in. And I knew that it was important for me to hand over. So when we looked for local leadership, where I was able to identify, and I started training. And the process of handover started in 2023. But in the midst of handing over, we had this church challenge where leadership within the church started to fight amongst themselves. And then we had a mini church split. And when I share that to a lot of the pastors, they all tell me, JT, welcome to Church Planting 101. We will always have this kind of church split. But I'm happy to say in 2025, last year, I was able to hand over the total project, the whole ministry to the locals. And that was a goal and a vision that I had. And I'm thankful that God provided that. Now, what I'll do is we'll show a video of the last 10, 15 years. And I say videos and pictures are far, speaks a lot of words more than my explaining the 14 years I've been there. So it's a separate file. Not the back, no, it's a separate file, the big file, sorry. It's the one that says WIC, which I'm using the same video as the previous church. Yep, that's the one. Along the way. But God's been good over the last 14 years. I would say that, over my 14 years here, roughly over 260 elderlies came to Christ. Many of them who've actually gone to be with the Lord. I had the privilege of baptizing over 35 of them. thousands and thousands of food packs were actually handed out. And there's many stories of healing and miracles. And you can go to the next slide. One of the things that I look at is one of the things that I feel that we've failed while in my 14 years there is actually the kids ministry. We've had we gathered about 20 kids, and really looking for kids in rural Thailand is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Now, our goal was to look for orphans and abandoned children. And as a foreigner, when you come in and you start, we surveyed over 98 villages in my whole region where I was in Saunikoha. And whenever they know that you're from Australia, trying to survey and find out who are orphans and who are abandoned kids, and all of a sudden you see everyone's orphan, everyone's abandoned kids. So we had the initial years that I was there, it was really hard to find out, trying to sift out, are you really an orphan? And are you really an abandoned child? Because every time we came, we did surveys, and they found out, they're here to help them with education. They're here to help them with their programs of life skills. Each and every child is then become abandoned. Each and every child is become an orphan. So we had it tough, but we were able to get, out of all of that, 20 of them on our program. But sadly, those 20, 75% of them actually made their own choices to move on with their own life because of peer pressure. One of our key things in our programs is that we want to make sure that we keep the child continuing education. In rural Thailand, when they come to a certain age, either they get married off, or one of the very common things for males is basically become a laborer to find work straight away. If it's a female, the most common thing is to go to the red light districts and become a prostitute. And one of the things we found is education is a key thing for children. And we tried our hardest in giving them life skills and our hardest in encouraging them to say, no, education is one of the key things. But 75% of them decided, no, I prefer hang out with my friends. So I'm not going to come to your program. And we have a very strict thing. If you're not committed to the program, you're out. And so I feel in some sense I failed because after 14 years, I can go back. Last year I went back and I visited some of these kids that had left our programs, and it was quite sad. One of these girls that was on our program at 13 had her first child. And in particular, this family had 3 siblings. The youngest one was one that was so committed to church that, we were training her to be a worship leader. And I encourage all the young people to serve as young as they can. We have like a 7-year-old, leading worship. But unfortunately, because of the household and the environment she was, because my older sister at 13 had a child, when she became 13, she had her first child also. The middle child, which was quite sad, I found out was actually in prison because of selling drugs. And just hearing stories as such, it breaks my heart because I feel, JT, you failed. You failed those people. But as there's bad stories, the negative stories, there's also the positive. Those who stayed on, they strived on. I'm so happy to be able to see the ones that stayed on, they finished their education in university. A lot of them moved on to become accountants, and they're out in the workforce and doing very well for themselves. I still remember these kids when we first met them. I said, what do you want to be? I don't know. What is your goal, after university? And 99% of them would actually, I want to be a teacher. Because that's all their exposure was. In school, I see a teacher, that's my education pathway. And we took a while for them to say, no, let's dream bigger, outside of just being a teacher. There's becoming doctors, becoming accountants, becoming lawyers. And that's the dream that we fed into the children, and I'm so glad that, if I look back now, these so-called young adults, they're in their early 20s now, are doing very well in their life, and I actually thank God for them, for that. Let's go to the next slide, if I could have that. This man, is now our local lead pastor. Very simple man. He's a farmer, and you can say he's not educated, but he's I call a jack of all trades. He spent about 15 years in Singapore as an electrician, working out there, and come back and he's a farmer who owns about 50 rai of land. And he's one person where the Lord placed on my heart to say, train this guy. This is a local person. And I'm so glad that the Lord had actually brought him into my life, because he seemed like he's got the same DNA as I have in terms of the way he thinks, the way his ethics are. And he's a Thai, but not a Thai in some sense in terms of his thinking. And he's doing very well right now at the church. In fact, all they did in 1 year has surpassed all I've done in 14 years. And that's the impact of the locals. They're doing so great that, one of the Christmas outreach, they went out in 1 year, they reached out to 250 families. Now remember, in 14 years, I reached out to 215 elderlies that came to Christ. They went through for 250 families in 1 year. And out of that, 35 came to become new believers. Out of the 35, 10 actually really committed into coming to church, committed to a life group. And that's wonderful. I hear he shares me stories about how they would go and visit elderlies, and they would step out in faith and pray for healing. And we've seen many of that happen throughout our time there in Thailand. They experienced 7 baptisms in that 1 year. I did 35 in 14 years. They did 7 in 1 year. And it's awesome. Let's go down to the next slide. And I wanted to show you this baptism clip. It's a short. Now it's a simple clip and simple joy of seeing this lady. Give me the next slide. Next one. She's the one on my left. The one on my right, it was Cafe. He's one of our foundation kids also. He was supposed to get baptized when he was much younger, but on the date of his baptism, he never actually turned up. And eventually he came back after going out to Bangkok, got addiction to drugs. He came back to the village and he recommitted his life, and he's doing really well. On his left, that's his mother. Now, why I'm showing this clip is when I first arrived in the village 14 years ago, his mom was a drug addict. Every time she saw me, I was worried for my life because she was very aggressive. She would come after me. I'm not sure, in a very aggressive way. I'm not sure if she's chasing away from the village or if she was after me for something, but all the time, whenever she grabbed me, she would say, Atan, means, Pastor, I don't have any money. She said, give me money. And obviously, the money was not just for her food, the money was so I can go and have my drugs. And I lost hope on this family in some sense. But for that child, we brought him in on the program and we tried to help him, but this was just last year. It's such a great privilege to see how she had given up drugs and how she accepted Christ, and for her testimony, she says how she gives glory to God for all the healing. And you could see just a simple joy of her baptism, what the great joy she had when time she arose out of the water. So that is such a great closure for me, if I could use the word, in Thailand. God has been doing great, amazing things. The church currently, has about 4 life groups in different villages, and they are doing extremely well. So I'm so happy that my time in Thailand is so-called complete and over, and I moved back to the lovely shores here in Australia. But in saying that, in reflecting about my time, it wasn't all good. There were many challenges. Just like any ministry that Pastor Yoki would have gone through, there are always many challenges. And you can go down to the next clip. That was just Christmas service. One of the greater things that I forgot to say is that when we started the foundation in Thailand, the whole community means the whole district knows about the foundation. They don't know about the church because we always promoted the foundation. And the church came later. And I realized one thing, it says, I wanted the whole community not to know about the foundation, but I wanted the community to know about Jesus. I wanted to change the mindset of the community where it's not the foundation, but it's the church that is there for them. And I'm happy to say that over the years we've moved away from the foundation work, where the church has taken over most of the things that we do as a foundation, and it's become the church programs. And now the church itself is putting its name out there, where the community is aware that there's a church within the community. So I'm really glad with that. And the church is taking on the vision to carry forth in terms of what's there, what we have in terms of our vision. I talk about challenges, and these challenges comes in many different forms. One of them is cultural challenges. Cultural challenges, and I'm not sure about Indonesian, some of the younger folks might understand that, it's very, very different. Thailand, they respect you so much that everything you say to them, it's yes, yes, yes. Even though inside is no, it's outside is yes. And it's frustrating because, when you ask them, really, how are you doing? I'm good. But in reality, they're not good. And that makes it so much harder to do ministry, because I'm very pastoral. I like to sit down, I like to share my life, and my life is problem after problem after problem. And then for them is, I'm all good. So that was one of the frustrations that we've had that hindered our growth, because I did not know what was real and what was not. Then there were challenges for new believers. If there were new believers, what happened, especially the elderly, if they came back to the village, they were persecuted. Basically, if the village community found out that they became Christians, they will give them the ultimatum. If you become a Christian, you can't stay in this village. So a lot of them who we share, they become Christians, they want to have Jesus, but they get pressure from the neighbors and within the village leader. The following week when we come back, they will be very silent. They won't even speak to us. So those are some of the challenges that we actually face being there. And then there's leadership, power struggles within leadership. I'm not sure about Indonesia, but in Thailand, the pastors are put on a pedestal. They are very, the pastors are like gods. For me, from Australia, I look at it the other way. We pastors are servants. We're at the bottom. We're here to serve you. But the locals, that's a power struggle. Especially when I was appointing the local leader. I had a staff who really wanted to take that power struggle to become the next leader, and that's where we had the church split. So for me, these were the sadder moments for me when time we had the church split. And I think Pastor Yonke would, I'm not sure how many experiences you had with that, but whenever we have that, our baby gets split in half and moved it two different ways, it hurts me. It saddens me as such, and I've always questioned and asked God, I said, God, why? Why is this happening? And this particular verse that I have that I want to challenge you for all of us is something that keeps reminding me to get up. Micah 7:7-8, it says that, but as for me, I will look to the Lord and I will wait for God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Rejoice not over me, O my enemy. When I fall, I should rise. When I seek in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. You see, there has been many disappointments that I would go through on the mission field. And not just on my mission field, in my own personal life. I've had gone through challenge after challenges after challenges. And this is the one verse that keeps reminding me, JT, get up. You see, because we have this God that will be a light when we always see darkness. Because when we journey in life and when there's challenges, it is so easy for us to just say, I'll just stay down. I'll just hide in the corner. I'll just put a blanket over myself and hide in bed and sleep all day. And that's what we call by depression, when depression starts sinking in. We will go through challenges after challenges in life. But I want to encourage you, no matter how many times the devil knocks you down, remember what Micah actually said, the prophet Micah. But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Sure, it'll be some time, maybe, but my God will eventually hear me and rejoice not over me or my enemy, because I'm not down, I'm not staying down, because what I see in this whole darkness, I see the Lord that will be my light. I see the Lord will be my light. Let me give you some context about this verse. The book of Micah, it was written by the prophet Micah, who ministered in the southern region of Judah. Now, this is a time where deep moral and spiritual crisis was happening in Judah, both in the southern and the northern kingdoms of Israel. There was widespread corruption amongst the leaders, corruption among the judges, corruption amongst the priests. And there was, a widespread injustice towards the poor. Idolatry, false worship was happening everywhere. Social breakdowns, even within families. And if you read verses 5 to 6 earlier on, Micah was actually stating, it says that you can't even trust your own family. Because even your own family, your own relatives, they will be the ones stabbing you in the back. They will be the one who is actually trying to break you. So that you can imagine that community that Micah was experiencing was so corrupt and so bad. And sometimes you look at it and it says, it's just like our modern day today. We go through so many things. But here in chapter 7, as much as Micah expresses his sorrow and his despair, he compares it to this one thing, and this illustration is like, he's out in the harvest field looking for fruit, and he finds no fruit at all, none, which symbolizes that righteousness and godly people have almost completely disappeared from that society. So what he describes in that society that he was in is that everyone is in wait to harm others, that no one trusted no one, not even within their own families, and there was evil, widespread evil throughout. But verse 7 was a dramatic turning point. Here we can read that describing the darkness that surrounds Micah, he declares his own personal commitment. And this commitment, he says, as for me, despite the surrounding corruption, he chooses this. He says, let us look expectantly to the Lord. Let us wait patiently for God's salvation, trusting that God will hear him. Now, from a personal resolve, he continues this shift to hope and confidence, addressing his enemies, and possibly his enemies at this moment would be Assyria or Babylon, or maybe even the spiritual enemies like Satan. He's addressing his enemies, acknowledging this is only a temporal fall. This is only temporal darkness. And he goes and he declares that there is future restoration and vindication through the Lord, through God's light. When I read this verse, which I held dearly for myself, every time I fall, every time I have these challenges, I look at this and I say, no. As for me, I will look to the Lord. I'll wait for him, my God, my salvation, to hear me. So Satan, don't rejoice over what's happening right now, because I will arise. I will get up, because my Lord, my God is my salvation. He is my light. And I believe this encouragement, these two verses, simple verses, is not just for the Israelites that the prophet Micah had. I believe it expresses an encouragement of each and every one of us here today. A beautiful expression of personal faith and resilience in a time of crisis. And I'm not just talking about the field crisis. I'm talking about our own personal crisis that we go through. And each and every one of you, each and every one of us are not immune from it. We will go through crisis. But it brings encouragement to us. Encouragements that when we face difficulties, we can overcome. I'm not sure about you, but if I look back, this is April, May, June, 6 months of the year is coming to pass. And I love New Year's because the New Year is a good time for where you reset. How many of you, be honest with me, how many of you did New Year resolution this year? Majority of us would say, this January 1, I'm going to do a New Year resolution. Now, be honest, how many of you are still doing what you have wrote down? Some of you, some hands going, oh, good on you. I started this year coming back, I came back 28th of December, just before New Year's, to Australia, and I told myself, JT, this year I'm going to be fit and healthy. That's my resolution. Because when I was in Asia, I ate like a pig, and I hardly exercise, and I'm getting older, and so this year is my resolution. I am going to be fit and healthy. I didn't last a week. Because when I came back to Australia, we don't have meat pies in Asia. I love my meat pies. We don't have sausage rolls. We don't have, we have Krispy Kremes, but we don't have, Baker's Delights. I love my bread. I'm from Fiji, by the way. And in Fiji, our basic staple is bread, and I love my bread. And we all know that's not the healthiest food ever. So within a week, I can throw my resolution out the window. But you see, more importantly, for us, I gotta remind myself, JT, this is temporary. I gotta get up. I gotta arise. There is hope for me. There's still hope for me in terms of my fitness. There is hope for me. And the same for you. There is hope for you. As for me, I look to the Lord. I will wait for God, my salvation. My God will hear me. And God is going to hear you. Because, you know why? God has proven in your past that He's done it once. And if He's done it once, He'll do it again. And many people forget this. Many people who actually are journeying with God, they say, oh no, God's not going to do this for me. But the reality, if you sit still and go back and look at your life, have you seen God done miracles in your life? No matter how small, how big. You have. And if He's done it once, He'll do it again. And that's a confidence I have in myself that yes, in the same God that we believe, this is the God of my salvation, that this God will hear me. So I'm declaring to the kingdom of darkness, don't rejoice yet. It's only temporary. I will overcome. I will arise. I will rise. I will get up from my situation. Rejoice not over me, O my enemy. The devil, the kingdom of darkness, when I fall, I should rise. And you can give me the next clip. I'll share with you this one personal story, and I'm not sure if you heard this before. I can't remember. I always share this because it's so dear to me. Many people ask me, oh JT, out of the 14 years, what was one experience you remember that you can take away? And there was one of them, I would use the word darkest moments in my time on the field. And these darkest moments where I really wanted to give up. I wanted to throw my towel in, and I said, that's it. If you look at my roadmap, the first 3 years when I was in Thailand, it was so boring. When I say boring in the sense is that God gave me this huge vision to reach out and restore hope to orphans, neglected children, and abandoned elderlies. Great vision. And when I went in there, I met a lot of elderlies, because there's a lot of elderlies. I met a lot of children, but I never found one orphan. I never found one abandoned child. And for 3 years, all I was doing was visiting elderlies. Elderlies in, elderlies out, elderlies in, elderlies out. And if you do that in and out, you wonder, God, what am I doing here? Now, remember, I'm Asian in a sense, and we Indonesians are Asians, and I look at this, ROI, which is my reward of investment in terms of my time spent here. Is it a good input or not? What am I getting out of it? And for 3 years, if I was only visiting elderlies, I think I wasted my time. I uprooted my family from Australia to be out in Thailand. I said, we wasted 3 years of our time. Zilch, nothing is happening. And I came to a point that morning after having devotion, I went to God, I said, God, that's it. I was in such a depressive state, and I told God, I said, I'm throwing my towel in. That particular Saturday, I still remember, we had this outreach program where I had listed that I'm supposed to visit about 7-8 families, all elderlies. And I told God that morning after praying, I said, God, I gave it a good run, 3 years. That's it. I'm out of here. I can't do it anymore. And I kept grumbling and complaining all the negative things about what was happening with me there. But I still committed myself. To the day. I said, okay, I've got 7-8 families to go to. I'll visit them. And we went visiting, and I couldn't wait for the last family. Thailand is hot. Rural Thailand is very hot. You talk about heat waves here, 40 degrees. We get that every day during summer. And so when we're out in the fields, there's no air conditioning. The one thing I really wanted to go is go back home in the air conditioning and have my nice cold shower. So the last family when I went to visit, it was like, I have no mood to share any gospel. I don't even have any mood to pray. So what I did was my local team, I said, you guys go ahead and you guys share. And I just sat out close to the door, waiting for you to hurry up and finish all your conversations so we can go. And my job's done. And as we sat there, the team was, sharing and talking. I was like, tweaking my fingers and says, okay, get over it, done with it. And then she wanted to accept Christ as a personal Savior. And I said, good. Okay, you guys, pray the sinless prayer and get over it. Let's move it. And we finished that and did all the formalities. And I was the first one out of the house. Put on my shoes and into the car. And as I sat in the car and waiting for the rest of them to come in, I heard God speak to me. He says, JT, stop. He says, I want you to turn around and go back into the house. And I want to pray for this lady. Now, this lady was bedridden for 3 years. She had an accident. She could not walk. She was bedridden. So when we visited, all she had was on the floor, and she was sort of crawling on the floor, moving her, using her butt to actually move. And I heard God says, JT, stop. Go back into the house, and I want you to pray for healing. And I laughed. I said, what do you mean by you want me to stop and go back and pray for healing? I said, you know who you're speaking to, right? JT, the biggest sinner in the world, sitting right here, right now, and you want me to go pray for healing. Ha, 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 that's a joke. And then, humanly, what we would do when God speaks is we give excuses. I said, but God, remember, culturally, it's not really nice for us when we've said goodbye and walked out of the house to go back into the house. Now, really, that wasn't a real good reason. There's no such thing as culturally. But I gave that reason to God, culturally. And then, God, I'm not in the mood to pray for healing. I wasn't in the mood to share the gospel. I wasn't in the mood to share Jesus. How do you think I have the faith to pray for healing? But there's one thing I learned in my Christian walk is when God speaks, you obey. So I told him, I gave him a challenge. I God. I said, here's my for you. I said, I want to go and pray. I'll be obedient. But if nothing happens, the joke is on you. Because I already told you up front, I feel like the biggest sinner and biggest hypocrite. And if you want me to go and you want me to go pray for this lady, I'll do it. Not hard to pray. And nothing happens. And you'll be able to come to the laughing stock. Let it be. So I told my team, I said, I'm sorry team, let's go back to the house because I feel God says I want to pray for this lady. And I sat down there, my heart was really empty, and I just gave a simple prayer of healing and kept praying. And usually what happens when you keep praying, the Holy Spirit keeps moving and you sort of as much as you're away from the Holy Spirit, you align yourself with the Holy Spirit. You start praying, and then my prayer faith started increasing, and I felt the Spirit of God moving. I felt warmth as I had my hands on her legs, and we prayed for about 20 minutes, praying, and I knew something was happening. But if she was sitting down, nothing was going to happen. So out of that instance, I told her, get up. And my team looked at me and says, what do you mean by get up? She can't walk. I told her, well, precisely. We're praying for healing, right? We're praying for her to walk. So, get up. And in that instance, I helped her up. And I had her over my shoulders and I started walking with her. And as we prayed, I started walking with her. And I was asking, what do you feel? And she said, she feels heat moving through her legs. And I said, good. I said, now start walking. And this lady who was bedridden for 3 years, God miraculously healed her. She started walking. And it's wonderful because the news after that is when her family came back. Her husband came back from the rice fields, found out that she could start walking, and she heard the story how Jesus healed her. He became a Christian. The daughter who lives like a block away or a village away, came to visit, and all the excitement about hearing what happened to the mom. She found out that God healed her, and she believed in Jesus. The neighbors started hearing about this miracle, about her story, and she was the one, like the woman at the well telling people what's happening. She was the one just sharing her story. And all of them knew she could not walk, and Jesus healed. And that was a wonderful testimony for her. That day, I walked out of the house. Obviously, my team was so excited because it's the first time they've seen such a thing. And I was driving back in tears because where the village is and where I lived was about an hour away. And I was driving, and I was in tears. And not in tears because of the miracle, but in tears of what God was saying to me. And in that moment, I realized what God was saying. And God was saying, that healing, it wasn't for the women. I mean, it was a blessing for the women. But I showed you this for you, JT, because this is the reason why you're here in Thailand. This is the reason why you're in Thailand. And I broke down, realizing that what God has just showed me and what God has said. I will arise. I will rise. JT, get up. We will go through challenges in our life where we may feel that we are useless. We may feel that we have, come to a point of being nothing. And sometimes we might be in that real corner of our room being depressed by saying that God will never use me. I'm not good enough educationally. I'm not going to make it in this world. But I want you to remember these verses that the prophet Micah actually shared. It's only temporary, because we have a God that has proven in our journey, in our life, that He will hear us. And we have a God that in the journey, that when we hear us, He becomes this light where we know we can come out of that. Micah actually said, I should rise. And my encouragement to you and I this morning is, I will rise. Many of you would say, JT, this is a great story and good on you, but you don't understand my story. You don't understand what it means to be down. You don't understand what it means to be lonely. You don't understand what it means to be depressed. You don't understand what it means to be, a challenge in this society as a woman, especially young people. The elderly might say, you don't understand it. JT, how hard is it in Australia when these kids don't understand what I'm saying or what they should be doing? I should rise. I will rise. This is a challenge that I want to give to us today as I bring this to a close. No matter what state and journey that you are in your life, I want you to embrace it. Many people who go through those hurts don't embrace it. They lock themselves in a corner and become depressed, and that's how depression comes into state. And then when you enter into the spiraling, that gets really bad. But if you, as Micah says, we have this hope, and if you declare to the kingdom of darkness that this is only temporary, our hope is in God, the salvation of our Lord, we will rise. Challenges in life is a good thing. I say this because sometimes God allows that, and you may understand why. It teaches us resilience. I share with you this story as I close about challenges. You remember the story of, give me the next slide. Jacob. Jacob wrestling with God. We should all remember this story in Genesis 32. You know how Jacob left Esau, and then he felt God is telling him, go back to your hometown, go back to your own village, and he's traveling back to Esau, and he's worried because Jacob stole Esau's birthright. We all remember that story. And for him to go back, he's wondering how Esau would feel, because he ran away from Esau after stealing the birthright. So to go back and confront Esau, for him it was like, I'm not sure how that'll turn out. And as he was traveling back with his whole family and all his herd and all his property, what happened there was that he himself, he was not in the front line. He wasn't the first one leading his family. He sent his family first. He sent his family, and then he sent his cattle, and he said, you guys go ahead, I shall come after. He stayed back. And this was when he stayed back, he actually had this wrestling with the Spirit of God. Now, the scripture says it was an angel, some says it was a human being, some said it was God. Okay, but he wrestled with something, and we believe that he wrestled with God. And during this moment of wrestling with God, what happened was that as they were wrestling, Jacob would never let go. And this angel of God was saying, enough, we wrestled all night, let me go. And Jacob went and says, no, I will not let you go until you bless me. He held on to him until you bless me. And it was so frustrating for the angel of God that what happened? He dislocated Jacob's hip. Now, I'll speak to some of the elders. Any elders had a hip replacement? Okay, that's actually very painful. If your hip is dislocated and get a hip replacement, that's a painful thing. You can't even move. I mean, if I was to have that, I wouldn't be able to move. But Jacob, who had this hip dislocation, continued to fight and wrestle. Now imagine this. Such pain, he still held on to the angel of God, says, I will not let you go until you bless me. And sometimes in life, God will give us hip replacement. He allows us to have our hips dislocated, that pain in our life to go through, so that we can acknowledge and hold on to God. And it's how long are you holding on to God for Him to give you that blessings. And we can know that because of Jacob's persistence, he's holding on to God, he had that blessing that was given to him. So sometimes challenges in life, struggles that you go through, whatever reasons that you are in that very pit and bottoms of your life, it's for a purpose, and maybe God's allowing it. But will you embrace that and hold on to God and say, no, I'm not going to let go of you, God, until you bless me? Because we have a proven track record of a God that provides and a God that helps and a God that's be there with us. So sometimes you have this journey in your life that you will go through with this pain, and that's okay. You can speak to your pastor. He can give you all these stories, and I believe he would have many stories to share, far more than I have. We will overcome. We will rise. This morning, I'm not sure where you are in your own journey, but I want to give you that encouragement. That wherever you are, whatever reasoning that you're giving yourself, and we will always give that reason, our own human reasons, hang on to God. Confess and proclaim that we have a God, our great salvation, that He will hear us. That I shall arise, because my God is going to be the eternal light that brings a great outcome for where I am. Why don't we all stand, and I'm going to close in prayer. You can have the worship team up if you want to. I'm not sure how you do it here, but we can have our eyes shut and I feel that some of us here today, that I feel that you are in some sense like me, how I felt that very morning. Unworthy, useless, not just being who I'm supposed to be, created to become. And you might have many questions, many doubts about why God. And I'm sorry to say this, that all your why questions that you have may not be answered. Well, it will be answered later on in life, but not right now. And humanly, we always want an answer right now. But one thing we can do is, I can believe that we can confess in our mouths with the very fact that we have a God that has a proven record that is always there for us.